Hello and welcome to the New Year Reflections and Intentions free training. I really wanted to create this training. There's a variety of reasons, but really for me, I know I always feel really good going into the new year with a plan in place, knowing where I need to focus my attention and energy into. 2025 is going to be a big year for us. We are expecting our first kids, so I know that there's going to be seasons and moments this next year where I won't have 100% of control over maybe even what I'm eating, how I'm moving my body, but there are some other areas of my health that I know that I'm going to need to support in order to show up and be a mom for the first time. So I really hope that this training is helpful for you, especially, like I said, finding that primary focus for this next year, but also not feeling like you have to play into all the new year, new me resolutions types of talk. I was just actually on a previous call with a client before I'm recording this, and she was talking about how she felt so good knowing that she was entering into 2025 without feeling like she had fallen off the wagon and she needs to get back on again. And that was a lot of the language she heard around the Christmas, holiday season is people, oh, we'll start again in the new year. And I think oftentimes we get to that point where we feel like we haven't really been maybe supporting our body how we wanted to, and the new year is that time to start. Although I don't hate that, and I think that's all fine and dandy, I do think it feels a lot better to go into the new year with a more long-term focused plan versus a quick fix. I am not a quick fix coach. That is not what I'm about. If you follow me on anything, hopefully you know that by now. I'm very long-term focused, very foundational focused, truthfully. And that is how I approach everything with clients. There's no quick fix I will give you on this masterclass transparently to completely change your life, because that would be a lie. But hopefully you get little bits of information on here that do support your body and give you, again, that place to start. So we are going to jump in. First, I really want to give you a chance to reflect on what you hope to gain from this masterclass. I think we all probably enter into signing up for a free masterclass with different intentions or ideas or focuses or goals, and I really want to know where you're at as we get into it. And I would love to hear what you do gain from the masterclass and what you kind of pick up and want to take with you as you move forward. So really the goal of this masterclass first is I want you to understand what inflammation is and what can cause it. Also, a huge piece of this is how food plays a role in healing. A big piece of, what I share is anti-inflammatory focused recipes. We are all eating 3 meals a day or more. So if you're not nourishing your body with good food, that is going to be probably the hardest thing. It's just going to be hard to reduce inflammation if you're not going to focus about food or have a focus on food. I think sometimes too in the new year, it's like, okay, I'm going to get to the gym 6 times a week and I'm going to join an exercise class. And again, that is all great, but you maybe work out like 5 to 6 times a week if you are working out consistently. If you're just getting into it, it's probably more like the 2 to 3 times per week. Something that you're doing every single day, like I said, multiple times a day, is eating. We have to eat to stay alive. And I think that food should be enjoyable. It should be something that you want to do and you want to nourish your body well. So we're going to touch on that as well. I also want you to be able to identify your values and what areas of your well-being needs the most attention as you enter into 2025. Again, not a new year, new me, just how can we be consistent with this area of supporting our body and do that long term. Long term is always my focus. Number 3 is you can create a plan of action for how to actually accomplish these goals and intentions that you set during today's course or training. And number 4 is you better understand the foundations. So there are a few foundations that I really implement with clients before we do anything. So if you're not doing the foundations, which it's hard to do all the foundations, and I'm not saying that it's easy, but if you're not doing the foundations, I will never recommend a supplement. If you're not consistently doing the foundations, I will never recommend even an exercise plan. Like, there are things that need to be done before we get really nitty-gritty about one specific area of our health, because these foundational Habits and lifestyle changes are what continue to keep you healthy. They help your immune system, they help support digestion, a variety of things. Your cortisol, they regulate stress. It's just really, really important that we both understand and know how we can use these foundations to rebuild and support your body from the inside out. So, kind of jumping off of that, something that I see a lot of practitioners do is when there is a weak area, rather than looking to rebuild and create resilience in that area, we look to maybe detox, right? We think we all need to start with like a new year, new me, detox. And rather than thinking about detoxing your body from things, so alcohol, maybe low quality food, processed food, sugar, most often it's not sustainable for you to detox from that long term. Even thinking about sugar, if we were to get on this call and you're like, okay, I'm really struggling nutritionally and I need to completely remove sugar, I personally wouldn't recommend that because it's not sustainable long term. But what we could do instead is we could fill your plate with things that aren't sugar and try to crowd out the foods that maybe are not making you feel your best and make some swaps around sugar. So rather than white sugar, we're going to go to maple syrup and honey. Just some adjustments like that. Again, we're not stripping everything away so you can't enjoy life or enjoy taking care of your body, but rather what can we bring in to support the systems of your body? And again, this kind of goes back to that mentality, right? Right now, do you have the mentality of, oh, I've fallen off the wagon this last month. I guess we need to get back on. Um, Usually that comes from a state of dislike. We dislike taking care of our body, or we think it needs to be painful or miserable to support our body. Whereas if you just think of your health as a continuous journey, constantly changing and evolving with time, you're going to have moments where you feel really good about your routines and your rhythms, and moments where you're like, I need to do something because I'm not supporting my body. That is more of how I, again, am approaching this. It's a continuous journey. It's not, hey, you did really, really bad this month. Now we need to get back on it. It should be enjoyable. I think supporting your body, supporting your health should be enjoyable. So hopefully you recognize that from this course as well. So a little bit about me. I've shared my story multiple times, but if you have not heard about me or my story, or you're new, hello, I'm Bailey. I am married to my husband, Nathan. He is photographed there on the left. We are expecting our first baby in March, and so really just thinking about how life is going to change when that time comes. It already has changed, but we found that out in July. So it's really been quite a year. 2024 has been quite a year. When it comes to me and what I do, I am an anti-inflammatory focused integrative health coach. So I recently added in blood work into my practice because there's so much that we can see through looking at labs. How I read labs is going to be different than your primary care doctor because we are looking for patterns of dysfunction, maybe nutrient or mineral deficiencies, organs that are really carrying a lot of the load in your body that need extra support. We can identify patterns of insulin resistance, type 1, type 2, diabetes. We can look at parasites, metals, mold. There's just a lot that we can uncover through looking at labs. So that is actually something I added in this last year because I started to see the value in being able to take a much deeper, more root cause focused approach. Everything that I do is root cause focused. I think inflammation is something that's a pretty popular topic these days. I've been working for the last 3 years with clients to reduce inflammation. I feel like I almost got a little ahead of the curve when it came to the topic of inflammation and anti-inflammatory foods. Now you might hear a lot about canola oil or high fructose corn syrup. Those are things that I integrated about 3 years ago, like I said, before really it was like the buzzword, the buzz topics. But I got into integrative health coaching, like I said. I started my business, it's called Divine Purpose, about 3 years ago and officially registered it as an LLC. But that stemmed from my own health issues. And I think that that is something I always like to express to people, is that it's not always been smooth sailing for me when it comes to my health. There's been a lot of seasons of life where I've tried a lot of different things and they've either worked or they didn't work, or maybe they worked for me physically, but mentally my mind was in a very, very negative, dark place. But really, if I rewind back to 2018, that was when I learned that I have fractures in my L4 and L5 vertebrae and a bulging disc. Something I still live with, something I still experience some discomfort from, but truthfully, very, very minimal. I like to kind of always hone in on that because that was a season of life. I had just gotten into college and I joined the dance team and I thought that I would feel really, really good. And then I just started feeling miserable. And there's a lot of things that changed now looking back that I could say, oh, yeah, that would probably be why you didn't feel great, right? I wasn't eating the best food, was staying up super late, was exercising more so as punishment than enjoyment. And with an injury like that, living with chronic pain, I would wake up, my roommate, my freshman year of college could testify to this, wake up crying because I was in so much pain. My back hurt so bad all the time. I was on 2 different pain medications. I did one, and then they were like, I think we should shift you to something else. They put me on a different pain medication, and then my kidneys started not functioning properly. And I was like, okay, I don't think that's normal. I transitioned off of the medication. In that time, I also did 2 rounds of steroid injections, and I found no relief. Truthfully, from 2018 until about spring of 2020, I had no relief from back pain and the low back specifically, right, where that injury is. And I always say, like, this injury is still present because I remember at that time when we were thinking about like surgery, especially for the first appointment I ever made, which we went to a different doctor after this, but he's like, I think, we should think about surgery, getting that set up. And this was the first day I learned I had any injury, and it was the first doctor I'd ever been to. And luckily, my dad has had back, not luckily, but luckily he has experience and he's had back issues of his own. And so he's like, we need to get a second opinion. We're not going to schedule surgery at 18 years old for her to fix the issue in her back. I think there's more we can do on the pain management side. So we did. We tried those modalities, like I said. And I remember a very real conversation that we had was that once I start, get married and think about having kids, we should consider maybe back surgery before that. Now, being pregnant with my first child, I think it's just really a testament to holistic health in a sense because I've been able to reduce the pain, so I almost never experience it. Even during pregnancy, I've not really had any low back pain, and I felt really, really good. But that is because I have found what works for me, and I've primarily focused on integrative or holistic health practices. Um, that's not to say that that will be, of course, the same story for everyone, but I think we all come from a place of, okay, I had this extreme life event happen, and now what do I do about it? Sometimes we try a lot of different things until we actually find the answer. For me, it looked like trying different forms of exercise and not really changing my diet. It looked like trying to lose weight, which I'll show you here on this next picture. This is kind of a side by side. That's me and my mom on the left. And then me, this was before pregnancy. This was a summer ago. But during this time when I was living with chronic pain, I'd gone into college feeling really good. Once I got to college, again, my lifestyle didn't look super health supporting. I was constantly bloated, always had an upset stomach. I had gained 35 pounds my freshman year of college, had that chronic low back pain, felt very uncomfortable in my skin. And I always like to say this was about a 3 to 5 year process. I say 3 to 5 because I still feel like I'm learning so much about how to support my body in the best way. But then to transition into 3 to 5 years later, rarely bloated, I identified I had an intolerance to lactose. I didn't know that my entire life. I remember always feeling uncomfortable, but again, everybody in college thought that that was normal. Like, well, yeah, girls are just bloated all the time. Like, it's because we get our periods. And being bloated all the time is not normal, regardless of if you have a cycle or not. But I'm now rarely bloated. I had lost the weight that I had gained in college. Now, obviously, my body's changing and evolving in a different way, but I no longer have chronic low back pain, like I said, even during pregnancy. And I just feel much more confident in my body. And I think so much of that also has to do with the mindset component. When we think about supporting our body, it's always mind, body, spirit. I truly don't believe that you can focus on one without focusing on the other two, because when we are nourishing all of those three equally, we're able to achieve true wellness, is what I call it. And I have a podcast called Nourish with Purpose where I dive into that and really dive into all the systems of our body, but specifically mind, body, and spirit, and how we can use all three to support our body and our healing journey versus just one or the other. When I look back at my own experiences and this whole process for me, I know that my mind was neglected a lot of the time. Um, I really have struggled with body dysmorphia, I would say, for most of my life from fifth grade on, truthfully. And I noticed that when I gained the weight, my mindset was really, really rough. And I felt so uncomfortable, and I would cry and be so mad at my body for failing me. And then as I started to, I really think my relationship with my husband was a huge piece that helped improve my mindset, and just how I felt overall about my body. But as I started to get into holistic health and I got certified in integrative health coaching, that was when I started to recognize that we can't separate healing our body from healing our mind. We really have to do the work in both. And now I can say, although no, I'm not always perfect and always feel 100% confident and good about myself, it's significantly gotten better because I understand that those two are so deeply intertwined along with our relationship with God, right? So how are we nourishing our spirit, our body, and our mind? And I just see the highs and lows. Typically when the lows came was because I wasn't focusing on my mind or my spirit. When the highs came, I was focusing on all three. Okay, so the truth is most people are inflamed. Most people, if you sit down at a table with them long enough, you will hear all of the slew of health issues that they're currently experiencing, that they've experienced in the past, the surgeries they've had, the ailments, the aches, the pains. Maybe you go to a gathering and somebody's like, oh, I just can't get down on the floor anymore, right? There is inflammation present in most people. And this is where we have to touch on the cycle of inflammation, right? Because inflammation is not just, okay, inflammation, here we go. You've got it or you don't. Like I said, if most people have it, then there's a cycle that does typically follow, or always follows inflammation. It always starts with stress. So this could be an emotional or a physical stressor. And I'm going to give some examples here. Typically then, after you have that initial stress, you're going to notice a minor symptom. So a minor symptom of poor gut health could be redness or acne or rashes on your face. The major symptom, if you ignore the minor symptom, the major symptom that is going to come from that will be poor gut health, right? So this then progresses to bloating, irritable bowel syndrome, constipation, leaky gut. If we ignore the major symptom, then that's what leads us to chronic disease, which I know this is a very extreme example, but colon cancer can be a result of that, right? So we have to identify stress. If we're not identifying emotional or physical stress, that is always where I start with clients. But if we don't do that, we're going to notice that continued progression through symptoms, ultimately leading to chronic disease, which is what we want to prevent in everybody, right? We don't want to get to that point. What I do think is reassuring about this is you can work your way back, right? You can have a diagnosis like colon cancer and then be like, okay, that was a check. That was my, car signaling to me. I always say it's like when we're driving a car, and I know nothing about cars, but all those lights that pop up of like low tire pressure, you need gas, all these lights start flashing, right? If we ignore the lights that are flashing, you're probably going to be broke down on the side of the road. Well, sometimes we get to that point in our health where we are like, I have this diagnosis of colon cancer. I'm going to do everything I can to support my body and get that out of my body, right? But what do I do after that? That's when we go back to, okay, now we need to look at poor gut. So we're just working our way back up. Our poor gut health. Let's improve gut health. What can we do to do that? Well, let's eat some better food. Not just get on a probiotic. Let's first focus on eating some better food. Then once, that we feel like our gut health is in check, we might notice those minor symptoms start to go away. Ultimately, our emotional, physical stress should also be less as a result of that. So regardless of where you find yourself in the cycle, know that you can obviously work your way to progress to those more negative symptoms or disease, but you can work your way back. So it's not to say that if you have disease right now that you can't ever improve from that disease. So common signs of inflammation, I get asked this a lot. There's going to be internal symptoms. Those will be your bloating, your upset stomach, constipation, brain fog, joint pain, weight gain, painful periods, headaches, acid reflux, Then those external symptoms that you probably will notice as a result of those internal symptoms would be weight gain, painful periods, water retention. So you've got puffiness around your face or your joints, yellow eyes, that would be a sign of poor liver function, a fuzzy tongue. So like if you've got like a white fuzzy coating on your tongue, it's a way to check your digestion and your gut health. Acne and rashes then are those external symptoms you'll probably see. And this is not an extensive list. Really, any negative symptom is a source of inflammation. This is just what I see most often. So I want you to jot down what your top 8 worst symptoms are right now. If you don't have 8, that's wonderful. If you have more than 8, again, jot those down, because as we move into the area that we're going to focus the most on, you will want to have this as a reminder, right, as you move forward of like, okay, how did I feel on December 30th when I was going through this course? And how have they improved or have they gotten worse? So it's a good way just to check in with yourself here. So there are differences in inflammation, right? So there's acute and then there's chronic inflammation. And this is how you can know the difference. So acute inflammation, that is going to be an immediate response that goes away or heals. So this is maybe like a 2 to 6 week process of your body, having that initial cut or scratch on your hand. That should go away or heal within that 2 to 6 weeks. So typically like an infection or tissue damage. The flu, a cold, right? When this becomes an issue is if you get an infection in a cut, or if you have a cold and it progresses into bronchitis, right? That would become a more chronic state of inflammation. So chronic is long-term. So something that you've maybe experienced for several months or years, it often is going to last in your body for as long as it needs to repair, overcome, or manage the damage. And there is no guarantee that it gets better with time. I think the hardest part is when there is an injury present, right? For me, low back pain, I feel like it took me a really long time to reduce inflammation to the point where my back was no longer affected by, or it was just no longer irritated by what I was eating, how I was exercising. It took a lot of trial and error, which is why this journey and the length of this journey looks different for everyone. There is no guarantee that in 90 days, in 8 weeks, that you're going to feel 100% better. But it's just that continuation of doing the foundations that you need to do to support your systems, support your body to ultimately reduce chronic inflammation. So there are 7 types of inflammation that can show up in your body: brain and nervous system, digestive system, detoxification system, blood sugar and insulin system, hormonal or endocrine system, musculoskeletal, and autoimmune. So I like to also list the symptoms because typically you can kind of pinpoint where it's coming from based off of just what is most prevalent, the symptoms that are showing up most frequently for you. I also do the inflammation assessment with clients. So when we meet for the first time, or I run that course Inflamed to Inspired, when we initially meet, which you'll have a chance to do on today's masterclass as well, is to take the inflammation assessment to see and pinpoint where it's showing up most prominently. I also think blood work is a really big tool here to identify not just the area, but also the organ most affected. And that is something that I do independently from my group coaching program, Inflamed to Inspired. You could do that at any time, is do blood work, a full blood work panel, and you get a lot more specific information to you. But this is, for 2-3 years, this was the place I started with clients, was where is inflammation showing up, because it gives you an idea of where you need to give your body support. So brain and nervous system, that's going to be your brain fog, headaches, tight chest, sensitivity to smell and light, mood swings. The more chronic disease piece of this would be Alzheimer's disease or dementia. The digestive system, bloating, gas, constipation, acne, diarrhea, heartburn. Again, the chronic stage of this would be leaky gut, irritable bowel syndrome, colon cancer. Okay, detoxification system then would be having to do with your liver and your kidneys. So this would be puffiness, weight fluctuation, feeling toxic, but not really being able to pin it on any particular symptom, maybe a yellowish tint to your eyes or rashes on your skin. blood sugar and insulin system. Maybe you have very intense sugar or salty cravings, blurred vision that comes and goes, just general exhaustion, or you feel jittery or hangry. Hormonal system would be the fatigue, second wind, dizziness, cold, hands and feet, period pain or heaviness. Something that I also can do with blood work is look at your hormones. A lot of the times we're told, oh, you have acne, it must be hormonal acne. I look at the hormone levels in clients and they look totally fine. We identify it's more of a detoxification issue than it is actually hormonal. So I think hormonal inflammation can be a blanket for a lot of things. And I've really realized through looking at labs that that's really not often the case. Sometimes hormones most often look totally fine and there's just something else happening in the body. Musculoskeletal system would be joint pain, aching joints, stiffness, chronic pain, probably the one you notice the most often as you age. And then autoimmune inflammation. So this would be if you have extreme reactions to food, maybe your hands turn bluish or gray, unexplained rashes or cystic acne, unrelenting fatigue, muscle weakness. If you have an autoimmune disease or autoimmune issue, you probably do know about that at this point. But again, it's like, how do we support your immune system then? In all of these systems, it's not to point out this as a state of weakness and make you feel bad about the, maybe the symptoms you're experiencing, but it's okay, what do we do now to support that system? I will tell you, let me go back to this. Most often when I do this inflammation assessment with clients, they notice they're polyinflammatory, which means there is inflammation showing up in more than one area of their body. Most of the time, if we have digestive system inflammation, we're also going to have detoxification system inflammation because your liver is responsible for absorbing minerals, absorbing fats and proteins and sugar in your body and putting it into your body, then releasing it as energy. So if your digestive system isn't functioning properly, it's going to be really hard for your liver to be able to absorb and utilize the energy. And then, like I said, distribute it through your body or detox it from your system through then your urine or your poop or, all the things that come with that. So you really can't just hone in on one area and only do things to support that one area because our bodies were made to work together, right? The systems in our bodies were made to work together. All starting in the brain, typically then progressing its way down. All right, so why are we all inflamed? You probably have heard a lot about food right now. Again, I wanted to emphasize food quality and why what we consume really matters. You'll see the pictures behind here are all the foods that I dislike the most. The Quest protein bars, the mostly Quest is what I see. But then if you think about like the protein shakes or the pure protein bars, a lot of things that are just not high quality but are actually in the health food section at your local grocery store, which I think is always a little ironic that there is a health food section in a grocery store because it really all should be edible, healthy food if we really think about it. So there are 10 companies, I'm not going to get too into this, but there are 10 companies that control 80% of the food in the grocery store, which is why if these companies aren't prioritizing your health, it's really hard to find products that do. If we look at this diagram, I think it does the best at just bringing awareness to, okay, almost everything I've ever eaten falls into one of these categories. Like if we look at Mars, they do Uncle Ben's rice, okay? They also do M&Ms, Lifesavers. If we look at Coca-Cola, we think, oh, they must just do pop. Yeah, they do pop, but they also do your water. They do your energy drinks. They do your carbonated water. Like there is just a lot that these companies are able to control. And if they don't prioritize the quality of ingredients in their food, like I said, it's going to be hard for you to find good food when you go shopping. And so this matters because, like I said, I'll hone in on this again, 80% of our food comes from 10 companies. 10 companies control what you're consuming. They also probably control the medication you're taking in the pharmaceutical industry in a whole. These companies make billions of dollars a year really selling addictive food. I think something that I noticed in college is I would have a lot of these sugar cravings after I would eat food. To me, that's a sign that I wasn't eating enough protein and my blood sugar is probably imbalanced if I was having very intense sugar cravings. But the thing that I was reaching towards was like mini Snickers or Rolos. And it's like, of course, like you're going to want one or more of those. You're never going to just have one Rolo. Like you're going to have multiple. It's because what is in that food, your body likes that. Like it is a hit of dopamine to have something very sweet. And that's why that food becomes addictive, is because it's like that hit of dopamine. You want more and more and more. If you're not getting hits of dopamine from things outside of food or finding satisfaction in life outside of food, it's going to be something that you continue to come back to because it is a pretty accessible hit of dopamine. They also, these companies buy out smaller businesses. They can change the quality and resell it with the same label. So that's where food fraud can come in. We also all eat 3 times a day or more, like I said when we started this masterclass. So if you are not consciously aware of what you're consuming high quality food, it's going to really impact your health more than anything else, because you do have control over what you eat to some extent, right? I know finances can play a role. I know accessibility can play a role, but truly, like, you have control over how you choose to fuel your body, and it's happening more than 1 time a day. So you want to make sure it is high quality. They're also adding ingredients to food that are illegal in other countries, artificial flavors, artificial colors. High fructose corn syrup also might be listed as glucose syrup. Things like that that they are using to make your food addictive, make you want more, make you buy more. And if they can money and you still continue to buy it, of course they're going to continue to do that. And so when we think about foods that might shock you, right, this is a list of foods that I don't recommend. If you're looking here and you're like, oh, I eat a lot of that. Premier Protein was the company I was thinking of. You're like, oh, I eat a lot of those foods all the time. That's maybe a chance to reevaluate, right? Things that I picked this because these are things that I always kind of thought were healthy. When I was in college and I was like, okay, I'm going to find some healthier alternatives. I'm going to start eating better. These were the foods I gravitated towards because this is what I saw bodybuilders consuming, and they looked great. Their bodies looked great, and they were able to eat foods like this, until I realized that these foods were still the cause of my inflammation. I didn't physically feel any different, although maybe I lost some weight. I didn't physically feel any better. Skinny girl, right? Fat-free, sugar-free dressings, not my number one recommendation, right? Premier Protein, I've seen a lot of people do protein coffees, even like the Fairlife protein drinks. I don't love those either. A lot of those, they are putting a lot of gums and thickeners and artificial sweeteners, sugar alcohols in those foods to still make them addictive, although they maybe have a few less calories and have really good macros. Ranch, I know that is a big one. Dorothy Lynch would be my weakness, I'll say. Kind granola, Lily's chocolate chips, Special K. I know when I've worked with women in the past, they're like, yeah, I did a Special K diet once where you really just eat Special K products forever and ever. And that's when I kind of come up and I say, there should be no company that makes you eat their food in order for you to reach a certain goal, right? I don't sell food. If I sold food products, that would be a conflict of interest because I'm promoting a food product that I think is going to improve your health, but I also make a commission off the food you buy from me. There's a lot of programs out there like that. I think you can focus on eating real, whole foods, reach the same goals, and feel 100 times better if you do it that way versus thinking, okay, I'm going to go on a Special K diet, or there's another brand or diet program that I talk about a little bit on the podcast because I have such a dislike for. Those clients, guess what? They go on those granola bar diets. They then become my clients. I'm not saying that pridefully. I'm saying that because, yeah, the diet gave them the physical result they were looking for, but they feel miserable. Their gut health is suffering. They're bloated, they're constipated, and they can't figure it out. They have hormonal issues. They can't figure it out. Like, well, what diet were you on? It makes sense, right? That is just what I try to prevent in people. I think it can get really, really simple if we just look at food that God has given us, food from the earth, food that is high quality and in its most natural state, and have fun with it and find ways to get creative with it versus it feeling like, oh, I have to eat boring food. I have to have a salad and chicken for every meal. I can't tell you the last time I had a salad with chicken on it. Like that is, or chicken and rice. Like that's typically like the diet food we think of like, oh, who wants to eat that every day? I can't tell you the last time I've eaten a meal like that because there's variety to be found when you nourish your body really, really well. So I could talk about that forever, but We are going to keep going. Really, the list that I use, or the rule of thumb that I use, is I look at the labels, I don't look at the health halos. So if you can't pronounce, or I always say like visualize or picture the first 7 ingredients in a product, it's probably your sign to find a different product. So if you're reading through it and you're like, don't know what that is, don't know what that is, can't imagine what that is, oh, stevia, oh, then we've got bleached flour, and then we've got red dye 40, yellow 10, and it just goes on and on and on. I'm going to say it's probably best that you find a better option. Or if it's something, I guess this is where you have to use your discretion. For me, this is something that I have done now for 5 years. I've been very focused on anti-inflammatory foods. So to me, I'm probably a little bit more rigid or strict around what I nourish my body with. If you're just getting into this and this is all very new information for you, just look at the first 7 ingredients. If you don't like, know, and trust them, or if you don't know what they are, maybe find a different product. Or I always say if it's something you're eating every single day, it is a tried and true food for you, either you need to make it from scratch or, again, find that better option. You might pay a little bit more, but if you are eating it every single day, that food is directly having an impact on your health every single day. So just having awareness around it. I know there are some people who will never give up their Hidden Valley Ranch, and that's totally fine. But there are substitutions if you are looking to make some swaps for those foods that you love. So when it comes to the list, sugars will be the one that you're going to look for in your food. So these are considered the inflammatory. This is a very, I would say, basic list of the inflammatory ingredients. It can get way more complex than this. To me, I don't think it really needs to be that complex. We could start looking at different types of salts and all the additives that they're adding to food. These are what you'll see most consistently and are primarily going to be a cause of inflammation. So high fructose corn syrup, white sugar, stevia, that's one you're going to want to do in moderation. It's natural. It is a natural sweetener, but it can mimic like hormonal birth control. So it can mess with hormones and just your body throughout the phase of your cycle. So you just want to be aware of how often you're consuming stevia. Monk fruit, sugar alcohols. Most of your sugar-free foods will have sugar alcohols. Those are very addictive. And so that's why you can have a low calorie sugar-free food, but you're going to want more of it because, again, it has like a very potent sweetness to it that your taste buds really do enjoy. And then dairy. So that is only if you're intolerant to dairy. I do not believe that dairy and gluten are inflammatory foods if you're eating high quality and if you don't have an intolerance to them. When you are intolerant to dairy and you continue to consume dairy, that's when it becomes inflammatory. So just something to be aware of. When it comes to carbohydrates, you're looking to avoid that enriched or bleached flour. And most often I notice clients, if they are not celiac, again, that is a different extreme, but if they have maybe a hint of a sensitivity to gluten, that enriched or bleached flour is actually what they're more sensitive to than the gluten itself. So it's typically more so has to do with the quality than the actual gluten. Additives will be artificial flavors or colors. Food dyes, those are a really big thing right now. Food dyes, high fructose corn syrup, artificial colors and flavors, those are kind of buzzwords. Xanthan gum, gar gum, cellulose gum. Gums can really affect your gut health. So if you have, patterns, if I'm looking at blood work and see patterns of leaky gut, okay, we've got to look at what is in your food. What kind of gums are in your food, because that can affect that. And then natural flavors. This is also in health foods. Natural flavors is becoming the new artificial flavors just because there are, I don't even know how many different ingredients they can put under the label of natural flavors. And so they can really kind of disguise what's in the product and not have full transparency. So I just raise a little question around that. My first question is always, okay, but what is the natural flavor? Most often a company probably can't tell you or doesn't disclose of that. And then oils, these again are kind of the buzzwords right now, but inflammatory oils, vegetable, soybean, sunflower, the exception here would be that high oleic sunflower oil, canola, another word for that is rapeseed oil, and safflower oil. I'm not saying this all to overwhelm you, make you feel like you can't eat anything, because eating things in moderation is not a bad thing. But again, if you are noticing when you go through your pantry, like, oh, most of those ingredients are in every single thing I'm consuming, that is most likely, I can't say with 100% confidence, but why you have issues of inflammation, why you have the symptoms you do. So we have to think about how we're nourishing our body, like I said, because we're doing it every single day, multiple times a day. So this is the inflammation assessment. Like I said, those 7 areas of inflammation that show up in your body most consistently. This will be what you can take to actually figure out where inflammation is showing up most often. It is not blood work, so blood work can get very nitty gritty, very person specific. This is probably my number one most recommended place to start before you even get into blood work, because most often when we look at labs, if you're not doing the foundations, there's not much more I do for you outside of just working on the foundations. So taking a foundational approach, understanding what area has a lot of inflammation present, and then kind of working your way back to implement foundations to support your body or support that system. So that's going to be linked in the description of this video. There'll be a link there for you to click on, and you can go ahead and take that independently. So your results will be dependent on this kind of scale. And I use this by Dr. Will Cole. I cannot take credit for the inflammation assessment, although it is a tool that I use with clients. You want to really be within that like 1 to 4 zone in each area. I will say for most people, they are well above 10. That is not any criticism towards them, but it's just how often do we actually like critically look at how we're feeling? And when you're aware of it, you start to notice that maybe those symptoms aren't normal. And so that 5 to 7 range is that zone of false wellness. It's that zone where you're like, I feel pretty good all the time. There's no prominent symptoms. And then we look at blood work and we're like, oh, your liver is really, really impacted, right? Your body maybe's not been throwing you a symptom or a very consistent symptom, but there's something happening there. And then, like I said, most people will be that 8 and above. So this first time that you take the assessment, I want you to go into it with a lot of grace for yourself, because you will probably, I shouldn't say you will, most people score above a 10. I use the first time anybody ever takes the assessment as a baseline. We want to improve from there, right? It's not to say, oh, you're above a 4, you're failing in that area. It's not the case. You're above maybe a 10, we know where we need to start, right? It's giving us a place to start, and we can just improve from there. And so it should be encouraging. It should be like, okay, now at least I know. It shouldn't be something that feels overwhelming, daunting, or frustrating, because I don't want there to be shame or guilt around doing something like this. More so, I just want there to be awareness. So again, like I said, if you have inflammation above an 8 in more than one area, you are considered polyinflammatory, which just means inflammation is showing up in more than one of those systems of your body, meaning anytime we take a foundational approach, it's going to help all of the systems. So it's not usually shocking if we're polyinflammatory, because most of us are. When I took it the first time, I was as well. This is just a story or client kind of side-by-side comparison I wanted to show you. So I run a group program, Inflamed to Inspired. I'm running it again on January 20th, 2025, and it'll go until March 3rd. This will be the last really coaching I'm doing until I go into maternity leave. But within this program, this is an 8-week course, and these were the results that I got from one of a client, and I'm going to explain why these results happened. And I think when we look at this and we see numbers go from like blood sugar and insulin system from an 18 to a 6, to go down 12 points in 8 weeks is pretty insane. But it's the foundations that are allowing these results to happen. And it comes with support and accountability, of course, right? I think that's why anybody does a program, is because you want accountability and support. You want questions answered that you maybe have. But to go from a 13 to a 7 in brain and nervous system, 18 to a 6 in blood sugar and insulin system, hormonal went down 16 points from an 18 to a 2, and musculoskeletal went from a 22 to an 8, down 14 points, autoimmune an 8 to a 0. Pretty amazing results. And this is not unique to this one person. I don't share anything about my clients, which is why this is very confidential and I won't share their name, but this is not unique to this one person. Like I said, I've been doing this now for 3 years, and I will say every time I'm blown away by the progression. And part of that is because we're finally just emphasizing our health, focusing on our health. But how cool that you can make some subtle changes and notice such an extreme change in your overall symptoms and how you're feeling. So for kind of the results to explain her improvements, right? For her mind, and I know this because I talked to this client very consistently, but she started viewing food as a tool that she could use to heal her body versus a tool used just to stay alive. I think we've all maybe found ourselves in that point where it's like, I'm getting through the day, I don't know what I want to eat, I'm not inspired, I'm just got to stay alive. I just got to keep my kids alive, right? I'm not so much caring about what I'm eating. As long as my kids are healthy, I'll just eat whatever scraps they have left on their plate. Something moms are very, very guilty of that I see all the time is I'll just eat whatever's left on my kids' plate. Although, yes, I understand not wanting to waste food, you are valuable and you deserve to eat good food too. That's what I always remind my clients. I had a client once, she's like, well, I buy a lot of fruit, but I don't eat it because it's for my kids. And I'm like, why isn't it for you? It's like, well, it's like, yeah, because you're worthy of eating it too. You know, it might seem very, very small, like fruit, you know, but at the same time, like implementing fiber into your diet is going to make you feel better. So you need to also prioritize fruit, and it's not just for your kids. Okay, coming back to this. For her body, she understood that any movement is better than none. So we added in a post-nourishment walk. She also identified how alcohol made her feel. She completely removed beer from her diet. Not completely, I shouldn't say that with confidence, but removed beer and actually stopped smoking about a few months before we started working together on through the Inflamed to Inspired, which is, like I said, the hybrid coaching program. And she also then, you can see on the side here, these are her plates. So she created colorful plates and had fun with food. I think we often find ourselves in that state of like, ugh, I'm eating to stay alive. We need to have fun with food. If you look at this, you can almost identify what is in everything that she's eating. And it's not highly processed. It's all very fresh. And it made her feel really, really good. She had fun with it. Then how she nourished her spirit. Again, we're focusing mind, body, spirit. She had a supportive community. So it is a community. I usually open up 8 spots for this group program because I like for it to feel more tight-knit and for people to be able to share and feel comfortable sharing. But they encouraged her and supported her success. And after 8 weeks, she started using her story to also connect with other people. So I got to see just how comfortable she got sharing on Facebook with friends and sharing the journey, the highs and lows that come with this, because I can't just say that all positives happened from this. I know there were things that happened that she maybe didn't love so much as a result, right? Like maybe some weight gain or just feeling really good some days, and other days when she didn't eat well, she really, really noticed the effects. But I think what's really cool is that she also taught her husband and included him in the process. It becomes a lot easier when either you have a group of women to support you or you have a spouse or partner to support you along the process, so you don't feel like you're doing it all on your own. And I just wanted to read this little contribution she had in our Facebook group. It said, for me, because I asked like what the biggest takeaway for her was. And it said, for me, I think it's been about how food, especially carbs, calories, and fats. Learning that if it's the right fats and carbs, the amount of carbs, fats, and calories aren't quite as important. I used to eat low carb, low fat, low calorie foods, but they were having negative effects on my body because they weren't nutrient dense or nutrient dense foods. And the effect that food has had in multiple areas of her body and brain. So brain fog went down tremendously. Like I said, overall inflammation of the brain went down. So less memory loss, less brain fog, less exhaustion, more energy. Okay, so let's get into you. Let's get into setting some goals here based around the 7 dimensions of wellness. So I want you to think here of 2024, thinking of the peaks and the pits of your last year. Okay, so these are just some good reflection questions. You can pause this at any time to sit down and think more in depth about them. But what gave you energy this year? What depleted you? What do you want more of in 2025? What could you let go? If you have a vision, or what is your vision for 2025? What do you want to see happen, maybe in regards to your health? And what really changed in 2024 for the best when it came to your health in 2024? Maybe major life events that happened, the good or the bad, and your health status. Ultimately, like what do you want to see change? And the reason why I always kind of come back to health is because if you are not focused on your health, it's really hard to have the energy to do anything outside of yourself, right? If you're pouring from an empty cup, it's really hard to have the energy to be there for other people. Or if you are going through a really rough season of relationships, and you just let your own physical body go and you just start to eat whatever you want and isolate yourself, your relationships are going to fail as a result of that. And that can kind of go vice versa. So health is very, very important. To me, it's always number one. It should be the number one investment that you have each year is your health. That is also because that's a value and a priority of mine, which is where I want you to also assess what your values are. Like, what is your primary value? Is it, and this is where we get into the 7 dimensions of wellness, is it your spiritual health? Have you connected with a church or a community or a small group to dive more into this? Do you have a daily Bible study that you do or you go through? Your emotional health. Are you spending time in silence? Are you creating boundaries around work? Are you letting yourself fully feel your emotions, good and bad? Intellectual. Are you reading, listening to podcasts, getting in different groups, learning different things, continuing on with schooling? Physical. Are you moving your body? Doesn't need to be all the time, right? But are you getting in a post-nourishment walk? Are you eating really good food? Are you aware of what your blood work looks like and are actively making improvements to help with it, right? Social. Are you spending time with other people? This is where boundaries also comes back in. Setting boundaries is a huge piece of both your emotional and your social health. You can't go all the time and not expect your health to fail as a result. I've seen that also unfortunately happen in clients, is if you're not willing to slow down, your body's going to slow down for you. Never a point we want to get to. Again, you can always rebuild from that state, but it is really unfortunate to see somebody who's go, loves to always be with people, loves to go travel, and then they have a very extreme health issue happen. And it's like, okay, how do we slowly start building our body back up from here? So there's that fine line to walk. Environmental. Something that I shared in this last year is that we are in an older farmhouse, but in our bathroom we have mold. And so when I did my labs, I looked at my blood work, I noticed there was exposure to mold. And that's because I saw different patterns show up in my labs from a functional perspective. And I was really kind of debilitated for a while. Like, what do? I was pregnant. I am pregnant. And at the time I was pregnant, and I'm like, there's not a lot of detox supplements you can take during pregnancy to help support your body if you've been exposed to mold. We were not in the position to remodel our bathroom. So it's like, you can't always change your environment, but you can change how you react. So this is one where I think sometimes can feel debilitating if you maybe live with roommates and you're like, I can't eat whatever I want because I don't have access to a kitchen, or my kitchen's always a disaster, right? There's going to be influences here, but you can control how you respond to your environment, even if you can't control your environment. And then it comes to financial. So where do you feel like you're at with your finances? Do you feel comfortable? Is this a constant point of stress? Is this a constant point of arguments with your friends or your family? Do you feel yourself isolating because you can't go and socialize and do things with people? Do you notice you gravitate towards fast food because healthy food is expensive, right? Which is kind of a myth that I don't personally fully believe. You can find options that work for any budget, but I understand where the appeal is, right? To just go and get a $10 meal versus making a $5 meal at home. Like there are definitely influences there. So I want you to rate on a scale from 1 to 7 how you feel about each dimension of wellness. All right, so this is just kind of a value-based intention and goals to help you maybe identify your primary values and refer back to that 7 dimensions of wellness. So do you notice that your primary values, so I would say for me, probably my emotional, spiritual, and physical would be my 3 primary values in this entire category. I also am a lifelong learner, so intellectual kind of creeps up, but I would say number 1, as much as I would love for it to be spiritual, is probably physical. I'm very, very big into my physical health. Although this next year, I would like to see my value shift a little bit more towards spiritual and make that a primary focus. I would say spiritual and physical would be my 2 primary values. So do you notice that these naturally rank higher? For me, yes, they do. Okay, so do you need then help assessing these values? Or just a way to help you assess these values is thinking about what you spend most of your time doing and being honest with yourself, right? So if financial is a value of mine, but I spend most of my time going on very extreme vacations, buying myself luxury designer bags and the fanciest clothes, it's a value, but I'm not really respecting that area of my health and my overall well-being because my financial health looks probably pretty poor. Even though it's a value of mine to look really nice and dress really well, it's kind of depleting my savings. And then now I'm stressed about my financial wellness, right? So you have to be honest with yourself. Like, what are your values, but also how are you spending your time? How are you spending your money? Does where you spend most of your time also differ from what you want in 2025? So if you spend most of your time being social, but you want your physical health to be a primary value in 2025, you need to reassess your boundaries around your social health and then decide what can you do to support your physical health. It's that, again, fine balance between social, setting boundaries, and your physical health. And then also, what do you feel like is lacking in your day-to-day routine? So does this impact the way you currently feel physically? How about emotionally? How you spend your day is how you spend your life. So if you are spending most of your days doing things that are not supporting your body, not supporting your health, it's going to be impacting inflammation, ultimately, more specifically physical, emotional, spiritual health. Where do you see this habit? So if there's one habit that is lacking, right? So maybe it's, I don't know, eating 3 core 4 meals a day. Okay, core 4 is something I talk about within one-on-one coaching. A balanced plate, 3 balanced plates a day. Where do you see that habit fitting in? So probably around mealtime. Or do you need to make shifts in your schedule so it can fit into your schedule right now? So a lot of the time we make that excuse of, well, I would, but I don't have the time. Well, you do have the time, right? Somewhere you can make the time. And so we have to think about what we can implement right now versus, well, in February, I finally won't be working this job or these hours, so then it can fit in there. Because again, you're still prolonging the process of getting started right now because you're thinking about February. And that's just honestly, it's too far ahead of where we are right now. And then if you don't see the space, what boundaries are being crossed to prevent this habit from fitting into your day-to-day schedule, and what might need to be adjusted? So then we have to think about foundations, right? I'm a very foundations approach person. So how often are you sticking to the foundations? Do you notice yourself thinking that there has to be more to taking care of your health than the foundations? So the foundations, like I said, or like I'll say, is drinking enough water. We do a calculation within one-on-one and group coaching to identify how much this is for you specifically and how we can do that consistently. Eating 3 core 4 meals per day. Again, core 4 is the 4 components that make up a balanced plate. Moving your body 30 minutes or more per day. Doesn't need to be an intense workout. It could be going for a walk. Getting quality sleep. Women, we need like 8 to 10 hours of sleep. How does that fit in? Maybe in this season of life that's not a priority, but maybe these other things can be. Setting boundaries with other people, setting boundaries with technology, substances, work, taking deep breaths, slowing down, spending time alone, spending time in prayer. So do you, like I said, coming back to these questions, do you notice yourself thinking there has to be more to it than this? For 90 days with my one-on-one clients, we work on the foundations. And the results that I see are incredible by focusing only on the foundations, and then you progress from there. Like, it really, I know it seems simple for most people, and for me especially too, if I didn't have habits in place, I'd look at this and be like, that's a pretty extensive list. But there are micro habits in each of those foundational approaches that really do make a huge impact on how you feel overall and overall reducing inflammation. Do you have the tools to begin healing your weakest area? So if you've done the inflammation assessment, you might know what that is. And then who can you ask help from, or where can you find support? Going into a new year, I think support is a very, very big component, because if you don't have support, it can be really hard to be consistent with these habits, and it can be hard to make them more long-lasting. Okay, so if you're not sure where to start, it's totally normal, and that's totally okay. It can feel a little bit overwhelming to dive into everything all at once, and that is why I am running my course Inflamed to Inspired again. If you got to this point, again, I hope you're leaving with tangible takeaways for how to support your body, maybe a little bit more knowledge around inflammation. I'm really sharing this for the people who are like, okay, yeah, that was all great and dandy, but I still don't really know how I'm going to do this on my own. That is why I want to share this with you. This is, again, like I said, the last round of this I'm running probably for this next year, only taking on 8 clients in this group because I like when it's a smaller group. But what we do in Inflamed to Inspired. It is a 8-week course. We take that inflammation assessment at the beginning and at the end to see how your numbers change, like I did with that client example. We have 8 weekly coaching calls to deep dive into each area of inflammation. So we start with brain and nervous system and work our way down through all 7 systems to, again, identify how we can heal and support that area. We do weekly action plans to help you apply everything that you've been learning to your life. So I think that is what's the hardest part, is when you get into a program and you learn all of this information, but you don't actually implement the information. So you leave with 3 action plans each week so you know exactly where to start. I'm also offering weekly meal plans that encourage anti-inflammatory focused eating, core 4 meals. There's a Facebook group that encourages consistency and makes you feel supported. You also get a preventative care toolkit to improve your immune system, especially during cold and flu season, which I'm a little congested right now actually too. And we do a step and water intake focused challenge. So we are really holding you accountable to both moving your body and drinking enough water. So this is kind of an example of week 1. We are starting with brain and nervous system. So overwhelmed and exhausted, probably the most common symptoms I see in people. We go into the foods to support your brain and your nervous system. Healthy fats are a huge component of that. We transition into a recipe that you get each week along with the meal plan. The herbs that can support your brain and nervous system, so some more natural homeopathic remedies, a nervous system reset action plan, and then you leave with your weekly action plan. So we do this live on each call. I go through all of this. We explain it more in depth, answer questions, and then your action plan would be a cold plunge, sunlight before blue light, 5 minutes in silence. Things that don't really make too much of an adjustment to your life, but overall, this has probably been the biggest one for clients, is when we get to the end of it, they're like, I had such bad brain fog and now I have these habits in place and I feel really energized. It's amazing. Like, this is a huge, huge week, brain and nervous system, which is why we start with it, because your mind and your emotional health is so, so crucial. So if you're thinking about getting into this program, like I said, there's 8 spots available. It is, and the investment here is going to be that $298 if you do everything that I've listed on the previous slides. You can do this in 2 payments. I'm happy to work with you on that front. Or if you'd like to do everything that's included and also add in one-on-one coaching call, that is where it will be that $368 for, again, like that 8-week program. And you can pay in a couple different payments here as well. So the start date, details you need to know, will be January 20th, 2025. We'll go until that March 3rd. We will be meeting on Mondays, but calls are recorded. So if you can't meet from, typically in the previous programs I've run, it was like 7 to 8 p.m. Central Time. I'm a talker, as you can't tell from the length of this. So sometimes we go a little bit over, but it is recorded so you can watch it afterwards. 8 spots opening, and if you want a 10% discount, thank you for making it to the end of this master class or this training, you can use the code EARLY10 at checkout for that first primary or that option 1 slot, and it'll give you 10% off of the program, because I want people to feel encouraged and inspired as they enter into the new year, understanding what they need to do to support their body and ultimately support their systems to reduce inflammation. So the next steps for joining, the link for this program will be in the description of this video along with the inflammation assessment. So you can go ahead and click on that link. If you scroll down, you'll find a slot where you can actually sign up. Once you sign up, you're in. I've got all of your information, and I will be reaching out then within the next couple of weeks with everything that you need to know to get onboarded for this course. So that'll look like our first call being on January 20th, and we will go from there. All right, so something that I'm also doing is I'm doing an Oura Ring giveaway for this round, because it's kind of the last round of 2025 for me to do this course, just because I don't know what motherhood will look like or consist of. For both referring people into the program or for just consistently joining calls, it's going based off of a point system. Whoever has the most points will get an Oura Ring for free, obviously, as the giveaway. I'm just really excited because that tool has been so helpful for clients that I've worked with to manage their cycle, their temperature, their sleep, and I think it'd be a good thing for me to give forward to one of you. So if you have other questions, you can connect with me through my website, through the podcast, Instagram, and my email. Everything you need to know is going to be in the description of today's masterclass, so just go ahead and click on that. and you'll get everything you need to know. But thank you so much for joining this masterclass. You please, please, please feel free to message me however you need to with any questions that you have from this. If you have questions about Inflamed to Inspired, what that is consisting of, all the details, I'm happy to talk to you about that. Or if you have questions just on general symptoms or inflammation in a whole, of course, you can message me as well, and I'm happy to help. So thank you again for joining, and I look forward to hopefully seeing you in the group program.